So, hello and welcome to Monday Musings with our very special guest today. We have Alessio with us. Alessio, you probably heard of as the man who's wrote many game systems over the years. You've probably played at least one of them. As you know, we talk a lot about action on this show, so we're probably going to be focusing on that a little bit, but you've almost certainly heard of him for many a game. Alessio, thanks for coming on.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Lending some decorum to our little show. We've got the real heavy hitters on now.
There we go.
Hello to everyone in the chat. Thank you for joining us. Some plenty of regulars there, and plenty of not so regulars. Ooh,
there we go. Yes, all seems to be working. I'm just checking the chat on my secondary device down here. So we've got a couple of questions lined up, and we're going to be taking questions as we go throughout this stream. So if anyone has any burning questions, then please leave them in the chat, and we will pass those on for you.
Only the polite ones, of course.
Only the polite ones. Well, that's what we're here for. We take the flak and we filter through.
We are well known for our chat beating us up every week. They're just horrible to us. It's awful.
No.
They're lovely, really. Great bunch here.
And just so everyone's aware, Marcus is having a little bit of tech issues with his microphone, so we know he's a little bit quiet. And we've struggled to fix the issue, so we just told him to shout today. So hopefully you can still hear him. So, shall we jump in with the first question? So, Alessio, I'll give you the mic briefly. Nice, easy one. Please give us a bit of background on who you are, what you've worked on, and anything you've been working on specifically lately.
How long do I have to answer that one?
Well, we've got an hour and a half to fill, so be as indulgent as you wish.
Right, I was born. No. I started a career in, before the career, I guess I started loving toy soldiers when I was a lad, very young, teenager. Well, actually, even before that, my granddad gave me some awesome books about World War II, and there was kind of little games inside these books. Mm-hmm. It's called battle game books. Check them out online; they're really cool.
Oh, cool.
And so I started to play with those books first, and they had little war games, and then I had a big collection of toy soldiers, like HO scale toy soldiers. Like,
tiny then.
Airfix or Eshi, kind of 15 mil type. And plastics. And I initially used them on the beach. Basically, you build this fort, put the soldiers in, and then you stand a bit away and throw little stones at them at the fort. And as the explosions, fall and the soldiers fall, it's a great battle like that. But then, with these books, I learned about rules, and I learned about moving things, and luckily the floor in my room at home was a wooden checkered motif, so squares on the floor. So I was like, ooh! So I started to put those soldiers on the floor and adapted the rules from those games, from those books so that they could work on the big armies on the floor. Had giant battles on the floors of my room against myself, because nobody obviously wanted to play that kind of stuff when you're 8, 10, 12. And in general, I found that the cat tended to win, because basically went around and destroyed everything and destroyed entire armies. But no, that was the first step. And then years later, early 90s. I'm a university student in Italy. I'm in a club. We're playing Dungeons and Dragons, which is an RPG club. But that night, in the club, in a corner, there's a big table, and there's guys that start to take out stuff from cases and build a diorama and start to play. And I kind of, we are used to a few miniatures in the D&D setting. So we look at this and go there. It's like, what are they doing? Armies, these people. It looks like Lenschneck against these rat men. What is this? And there you go. They were playing Warhammer. First time I saw it, I was like, he must be mine, kind of moment. So yeah, started that. A year and a half later, I won the Italian tournament. Warhammer, which was a small affair, as you can imagine. There were not a lot of people at the time. So it was like a very elite sport.
Hey, a win's a win.
But yes. Oh yeah, no, I'll take it. Very proud. Yes. Yes. I won with Skaven. I was playing Skaven at the time. Anyway, so yeah, I got the title. A year later, I come to England, have a visit of Nottingham, and go to this place of legend, and I eventually got offered a job as a translator for Games Workshop first, and after moved to England. So from Italy, come over. 1996, that is.
Wow.
Start to translate, meet weird characters like this John Stallard fella you might have heard of, and Paul Sawyer, etc. And we, more importantly for my career, people like Rick Priestley and Jervis Johnson, the people that basically I started to work with for the translations. But of course, a year and a half later, a job as a games developer comes out, and I go, I just go, me. So yeah, that's how it started. I started writing stuff for Warhammer. Then a few years later, from Army List, I actually got a rule book for I think it was it 5th edition, 60? I don't remember. One edition of Warhammer. I got that, and then after that, 40k, and again books, and then the rule book, and eventually Lord of the Rings. So actually there was a magic moment, when all 3 main rule books were, by Alessio Cavatore, which was like, oh my God.
You'd achieved world domination.
Yeah, it was a very cool moment, and Lord of the Rings is very important for me because I'm, big Tolkien fan.
I was going to say, I actually want to ask a spin-off question now you're talking of Lord of the Rings. Obviously, we message each other semi-often through work reasons. Your profile pictures, you dressed up as a Rohirrim. Could we perhaps get a little bit of a story there?
Are you sure that there's nobody out there that heard this story like 27 times? I keep telling this story every time because it's just so cool. Right, I'll say it again. There may be one person that hasn't heard of it yet. Yes, I am a very important... I have this very important part in Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. Myself, the Perry twins, and Brian Nelson are actually Riders of Rohan. And we play dead Riders of Rohan. It's very important. For a couple of seconds, you can see our faces dead on the fields of Pelennor after the defeat of the Mumak.
That answers my follow-up question of did they let you ride a horse, but I'd assume not.
No. For a start, they would have had to teach me to ride a horse first. So that would have been difficult. No. So we just played Dead Riders of Rohan, and it was an amazing experience. It was so fun. It was great to be on the set, meeting the actors, going out for a drink with them. It was amazing. Like Riders of Rohan, I'm making coffee in this tent, and suddenly Aragorn, in full Aragorn the King, walks next to me and starts to make coffee, and he goes, "Would you like some sugar?" Yes, my liege. I will have some sugar.
Sorry for dredging that one up again, but I don't think you'll ever stop telling that because
no, I
think you've got a pretty nerdy fan base, and that's pretty special.
It was.
Career goals, I think, Max, for many years' time, whichever movie we can end up on the set on as corpses.
Yeah, an important part. And yes, so Games Workshop for 16 years, 2010, so 96 to 2010, that's it. End of story, end of love story, and birth of Riverhorse. So basically, I create my own company, and the first thing that happened, the idea was to make our own games. And of course, as often happens, things don't go according to plan, and what happens is, of course, again, a certain John Staller goes, "Ooh, we just bought this set of miniatures, this bolt-action range of miniatures. I'd like to make a game. Would you be interested in designing this?" So I was like, okay. Okay. So we we had this commission, the contract, and started to. Well, I was writing Bolt Action first, straight away for Warlord. I was writing Kings of War for Mantic. So yeah, it suddenly went into designing for other people, and eventually then we got back to Riverhorse and doing our own stuff as well, which we do, but we also design for third parties. Bolt Action obviously is the thing that was born out of that, our first service for other companies, and the rest is history, I guess. Is still going after what was it, 2021, and we started to design that in 2010. So yeah, it's some time ago, doesn't it?
Stood the test of time. Still by far our most popular game, and well, I'm a big fan. I play enough of it.
Oh yeah.
I play too. As a hobby. That's a cool part.
So I just want to jump in on a couple of the chat questions here before we lose them, because the chat's pretty active. So this is from one of our regulars, Haggard. What's your favourite game that you've worked on? From presumably all sectors of the industry, if you had to pick one.
Big question. I guess it depends in what regard. From a fanboy point of view, probably Lord of the Rings was a magical experience. For me, Tolkien has always been. I mean, I'm not religious, but if I had anything in my life that is close to a religion, the book that you always read, I have stuff I had it in my room when I was a kid, but I brought it up here to England, and now they're on my walls. I have, all the maps from Tolkien, all of them, like in pictures. And so, yeah, that's in a way is my religion, and being part of that set, dressed like that in the story, it was a mystical experience, literally. So probably that game, that moment was the top, I think, in terms of working for other companies. In terms of working for my own company, creating my own products, certainly, I've probably Labyrinth is the one that has been the Jim Henson world. Labyrinth has been a moment. Is what drives Riverhorse. Is the biggest thing we do. It's big. And then, of course, as an old guy, this was, I was young, I liked fantasy and science fiction, and then you get old, and suddenly history becomes really interesting. And now Bolt Action is the thing that I play for fun. When I go play war games, now it's Bolt Action. That kind of answers it, but there's many answers to that question.
No, good answer. I'm glad to hear you playing Bolt Action. It wasn't just for our sake, because we played. That was one of the last games I think I had before lockdown was against you. That was last year.
Let's not go there. That was very painful.
I'm getting a reputation. So we got another question here from Spindle Shanks. So I think we're going to get this one out of the way. I think a couple of people have been wondering this one. We kind of mooted it in the pre-stream chat. Is there a Bolt Action V3 in the works?
That's one.
Yeah, the golden question at the moment.
Yeah, it's been asked a lot. Well, obviously, what we normally answer to this question is since the moment we released version 2. There was a version 2 in the works. Yep. So you always look to develop your products, and you always look to do a next edition. And the fact that actually there's been this many years without another edition, I think, is a testament to what you were saying. The fact that Bolt Action is a solid system that people are happy with, play, and enjoy still now after 10 years of the thing. So in 10, 11 years we did 2 editions, like 1 edition every 5 years. There's not a lot of games that do that. Yeah. So in a way, there is always the "it ain't broke, so why fix it" kind of feeling. It's like let's not risk destroying this. But on the other end, of course, there's commercial drives to make a new edition. There's design drives to make a new edition. So that there's feedback from the community. The FAQs growing bigger and bigger, as we well know, because we work on those together. So no, there's definitely a drive to do another edition, and indeed conversations happen all the time about if we did a 3rd edition, what would you do? What would you change? What would you not change? Would you keep the army list? Would you not keep the army list? Would you go on this bit of the rules? Would you add tank wars in it or not? So the conversation happen all the time. We of course we talk about it. Of course we. By doing the FAQs, we keep an eye on the system and how it's evolving and stuff. So. Yes, at some stage it will happen, but I can certainly say don't hold your breath. It's not like it's going to happen tomorrow. The conversation is ongoing, but there is no definitive answer to that question yet. And if there was, I couldn't tell you. So.
No, I think that's a good answer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we've been feeding people that kind of line for a while now. Of it'll happen when it happens, and when we kind of need it. You know, if we forced something out today with barely any changes, I don't think people would be too happy. So let's find the spark that kind of drives what is going to be V3 compared to V2, possibly.
Yeah. It's going to happen, of course, but not tomorrow. But it's not today.
So I think that actually follows on quite nicely with the next question which we had for you, which is kind of obviously bolt action. It's been taken and run with. What do you do with bolt action these days? You know, there's other authors writing the things like the campaign and the armies of books in some cases. What's your specific involvement at this point in time?
Yes, what I do is effectively edit those books that you mentioned. So every time an author writes a book, some of them are very, very good. They have an immense knowledge of history, but maybe they don't play bolt action too much. Some of them play a lot of bolt action and history too. So there's different levels of knowledge of the game within the authors, because there's a range of people, obviously, with different experiences and so the idea, my role, if you want, is to be the filter that basically takes the manuscripts, reads through all of them, and goes, okay. It's interesting also that some authors maybe would explore a rule, a particular regiment, a particular unit, a particular vehicle that has already been touched by other authors, but they have a slightly different take on the rules. And so for me is a job of reading through and making sure that the rules ballpark fit with the rule book, with the armies of book, and check against other rules, other expansions, other books, and make sure that maybe the rule there, if it conflicts with another rule in a different book, make it very clear that that's intentional. That is like, yes, we have used we created the rules for, I don't know, Frost, but this is Frost when he was a captain. This is Frost when he was a major. So of course the rules are slightly different, and you have different takes on the same thing. And so basically my job is to keep all of this stuff on the path. If an author is going over there, you go come here. Where basically it fits more with bolt action. And sometimes we do take liberties. I mean, there are things that are very, very wacky, very out there. I mean, rules for the Maginot Line, rules for armored trains.
Sea Line is one that springs to mind for that.
Things that the fun is, the super fun is all the defenses, the home guard. So there's a lot of stuff that actually is not your default normal rules for bolt action. It goes a bit on a tangent, but roughly the core of the main things, so the playable units, the vehicles, etc., trying to make sure that the points values are right. I mean, obviously everything can be argued within a certain amount of points, but keep them consistent, keep the rules consistent. So I would edit the manuscripts in terms of rules, and obviously with more and more books coming out, it's becoming quite difficult to cross-reference all these, like, this unit appeared already. Which book is it already? And then we have our conversations like, find it. So that's, okay, to cut it short, I edit the books, the manuscripts, and make sure they kind of are closed and fit with the existing rules, with the other existing rules. And also the thing I do a lot with you guys is I tend to keep an eye on the FAQs, the errata and FAQs, and now kind of quarterly we do an update where I accumulate all the errata through the quarter, mostly from you guys sending me questions from the customers. When I used to go to tournaments, also from experience of direct playing in tournaments, obviously since COVID that hasn't happened a lot, but yeah, one day we'll go playing a game. And so taking all this feedback and collating it into the errata and FAQs, making sure, deciding what to answer, what not to answer, what say, and a lot of that goes into notes for development, further next editions, and amended errata, corrections. So that body of errata is certainly something that I accumulate through the years. And when the third edition, in this case the next edition comes about, I will take all of that and go, right. So it's all this feedback plus all the new ideas and all the commercial targets of Warlord, what direction they decide to go. So we kind of take all of that together and I've already been told that when the time will come, I will be the one doing the next edition, doing the iteration, basically the third edition, which will have to marry, all these elements into it. And so yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm looking after the system and planning for the future and checking that the new books fit with the current books.
So I assume it must be. Oh, sorry, Marcus, we didn't catch you there.
I was saying just a couple of bits then for Alessio to do, not much.
So yeah, I see a couple people have asked a question similar here in chat, but we've got this one on the list as well. If you had to choose one era or setting that you haven't worked on before to write a rule system for, what would it be? So that can be historical or possibly like a sci-fi fantasy setting. Let's assume perhaps IPs are on the table, like you were saying with like Labyrinth in the past. Or Lord of the Rings.
Well, down Lord of the Rings, I suppose Star Wars would be cool, but if we stick to history, I think I wouldn't go near modern stuff, because I found through doing World War II, which is the border of that, like there's still people that were there, that did fight. There's this difficulty there with, you're depicting a conflict, a war, a horrible thing as a game for fun and entertainment, which, most people don't have a problem with, but sometimes you get into areas which are a bit, like delicate. And I would definitely, for that reason, I think I would stay away from things like modern conflicts and even Vietnam, etc. I would rather look at antiquity, where basically you're kind of you're safe. Nobody's alive saying that, oh, you offended my sensitivity. So I think antiquity would be a good one. But on the other hand, we did work already on. I helped a bit with Hail Caesar at the time. I helped with Black Powder a bit. So I kind of worked a bit on stuff. I did a set of American Civil War rules for the Paris. So yeah, I dived into quite a few other periods for my career. So what would I do?
It's a bit more of a question of what's left.
It's true. Yes, there is that. Yeah. I've done science fiction, fantasy, history in quite different levels. So there isn't anything that makes me go, oh, that. If I hadn't done Lord of the Rings, the answer would be straight away Lord of the Rings. But done that, been there, done that.
Okay, so I like this question. This is one from the chat from Ogdog. With all your experience, what has been the biggest change in your view of wargaming since you started developing games?
A very good question. I think the path of the designer I've been on is started with looking at the rules written by other people. I was a translator, I was a hobbyist. I was looking at the rules written by people like Jervis, Andy Chambers, Rick, and I was reading his rules and saying, there are a few areas here that are not entirely clear. How do these people, do they know their job? This is terrible. Why don't, the rules must be perfectly watertight. I must, it must be like chess, where there is no question about the rules. Everybody knows the rules is clear. Why are these rules not clear? Kind of thing, yeah? So I had this thing in my head, which I suppose a lot of players kind of think, this rulebook doesn't cover this situation and this. You have the feeling of these people don't know what they're doing. Clearly I can do better. And so I started with this kind of attitude, of course. And, after just a few years, I was feeling very sorry for having those thoughts, and apologized to Jerry, so I remember for actually going, I didn't know what I was talking about. Basically, a war game, what I learned is that the war game, more so than a board game, because there are so many variables, because you're not working on hexes and squares. Writing a rule set for hexes and squares is obviously not straightforward, but definitely more straightforward than something that doesn't have that. Something that is on a table, on a diorama, with tape measures and lots of models which are built in different ways, converted on different terrain that is different for every player. And some people will have cardboard cutouts, some people will have fantastic looking terrain, some people will have... So convert the miniatures, put them on some type of basis, some people will put them on different type of... So basically the variables are so many that And also often the war game doesn't just cover a setting, a board game where you go like, this is the setting, this is the set, this is the area, this is the castle, this is the place. Where war games cover all sorts of terrain, all sorts of times, type of battles, armies, vast armies, different units. So what I'm saying is there is a lot of variables in the war game, huge amounts of variables.
Yeah.
And therefore you cannot, I think it's impossible to write a game system that is 100% always covering every single occurrence that can happen in a game, because there are so many things, borderline situations where you kind of go, well, no, okay, right, what if this guy sits behind a thing that has a tree in front and then the other unit comes in and does this from the side? And so there are so many potential situations that you cannot cover them all. So that there is a moment as a designer when you accept that fact that you're trying to give the best set of rules. In my style, if you want, is to try to give the simplest set of rules. I often resolve a lot of problems by simplifying brutally, radically. Some people will say too much. Bolt action. The problem of fleeing units. Yeah, Warhammer, when you flee units, they have to go in this direction, away from the enemy. But then towards your table edge. But what if there's an enemy in front of them? Well, then you go around them, but still towards your table. Oh, no, maybe you go towards the closest table edge. Well, what if that's the deployment area of the enemy? And then they rally and then they start fleeing. And so there's a lot of that. And for me, the solution in bolt action was like, when you fail your leadership test, remove, gone. The whole point of, I don't worry in this game, in this 6 turns game, whether that unit later on, 2 days later, reforms in a different village because they find each other, etc. No. In this battle, that unit is no longer effective. They may have surrendered, they may have all died, they may have deserted, they may have all hidden. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
In this game, that unit is no longer effective for the next 3 turns. The next hour. So I don't need to worry about it. And therefore, they'll remove completely all the fleeing situation. That is the principle. I basically went simplify as much as possible. You cannot cover every single situation. You have to accept that there will be a situation where people will have to respect the contract between the players. The contract that is, we're going to play this game, which in some cases we will have to go, look, this rule, this situation, not too clear. We can either argue for an hour and get really angry about it and say, or we could just roll a dice and say, 1, 2, 3 is this way, 4, 5, 6 is this way, let's move on, let's have fun. And accepting that. And accepting that's not surrendering, kind of saying, oh, well, I cannot write a set of rules that work 100% of the times in all possible situations, is not failing. That is what wargaming is. Is that borderline between a game of chess where there is no need for that, 4+, continue, or a role-play game where actually everything is an agreement between the players. A role-play game is like, doesn't matter, have I fallen into this trap? Well, I don't want you to die, so no, you made it. So there is that. A war game is in between those two, is neither of those, and how close it is to one or the other, I guess it depends on the players, depends on the game system. So is that thing accepting there is it's a very gray area. There is no complete black and white in the war game.
Okay, Marcus, do you want to read the next question 4, and then we'll move on to some chat questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Question 4's got a nice one, actually, nice simple one. Is there anything you're working on at the moment with regards to actual hobby? The building, the painting, the playing. What's on your painting desk?
I don't paint.
Sin.
I don't paint. I love playing. I love collecting armies. I have lots of armies in my garage downstairs, but I never painted one. I never finished painting one. I started painting a few and got terribly bored and stopped painting. Painting is not for me. I am into gaming, not painting. So I kind of like assembling stuff because I like the creative bit of, I'll make this guy doing this and poses and stuff. But then when it comes to painting, I don't have I don't have the skill, but actually I've seen a lot of people that don't have the skill to start with and then learn. I never put enough effort into learning, if you want, and always ended up commissioning armies to other people for paying for me or buying them wholesale, the whole army painted and stuff like that. So I don't do the painting side of the hobby. What is on the table for me at the moment is I keep toying with the idea of an axe, because I play Americans. I have a big American force with tons of everything, all the tanks and all stuff that I never use because I just have so much stuff there. But I don't have an Axis force. And I always thought, well, I should really have two, because I should have the good guys and the bad guys, regardless of your point of view, in films at least. So I'm kind of going, if people come to play with me, etc., I should be able to say, would you like to play these guys or those guys, and then we can play a game. So I thought, all right, okay, let's get an Axis army. And maybe because I'm influenced by certainly Hollywood and or history in general, I tend to see the Axis definitely as the bad guys, and I kind of go, I don't want to play the bad guys. I want to play the good guys. But and then I thought, no, let's have them. And I thought, can I find an Axis force that doesn't sound like the bad guys to me? And I did. I think there is an Axis force that is definitely not the bad guys in my head, at least. Finnish, indeed. The Finns, because you think, well, Finland, just defending themselves against this huge monolithic enemy, kind of like this heroic last stand thing. And yes, they allied with the Germans because they obviously were, they're common enemies of the Soviet Union. But as far as I know, they never quite, as far as I know, they never, for example, given their Jewish population to the Germans, unlike the Italians, which did give their Jewish population to the Germans. So I kind of going, I think the Finns are, the good guys in the Axis. So I want to collect them. And I always look at that and go, start to plan armies as you do, and go, I want some of this and that, some of this, etc. And then I go on the available miniatures and go, wow, that takes a lot of converting. Yes, one day I will do this, and I start to plan it again. So I actually never got around to actually doing it. So I keep thinking about it, and never. And eventually, actually, a friend of mine quit the hobby effectively and sold me his German army very, very cheap. So I was like, now I have a German army. The drive is a bit less, a bit strong, but I still would like to swap that for a Finnish army. So if anybody sells a Finnish army, let me know.
There you go. You heard it here first. If anyone's got a commission on the go. So we've got a couple from the chat here. I'm going to try and get through these pretty quick. There's a few. So we've got WAQCBC. Come on, chat, stop moving on me. How do you recommend competitive players and organisers keep things fresh within the tournament scene without any changes coming from a new edition?
The tournament scene? Is there still a tournament scene? you mean after we are able to meet again? Right. When will we be able to meet again in person and play tournaments? Maybe I'm boring, but to be honest, my answer is what I often say with rule systems, is to keep it simple. I don't think you need to change lots of stuff to make the tournament scene interesting. To be honest, if I was a tournament organizer, I would go, rulebook, armies off, end of story. And I would try to keep it very simple. In a way, is that by removing the huge amount of variables, I think it will bring... It's interesting because some people, I was going to say, we're making more chess-like. Which some people would think, oh, that's a great thing, making more chess-like. And some people would think, that's a terrible idea. So, depends if you like chess or not. But yeah, simplifying it would, in my opinion, makes it concentrate more on the strategy and less on the trying to get the armies, the lethal armies from this book here, which allows you to field 2 tanks, and this and that. More like, nope, this is the standard, and see who does best within this standard. I like simplicity. So yes, I would simplify, but I'm pretty sure that's not everybody's cup of tea.
All I would say is I'm just going to add a little bit of an extension onto that one for the question. Watch what John Russell's up to. Check his Wednesday things, because I know he's got something in the works regarding tournaments. So can't say anything concrete, but keep an ear out. So a couple more questions here before we move on. I'm going to skip that one because that one's already been answered. Okay, nice easy one here. What's your favourite faction in Lord of the Rings? Both lore and in the games.
Well, my favorite character when I was a lad was Legolas. So, and when I play D&D, I always play Wood Elf Ranger. Maybe that gives you a bit of an idea. So yes, I think Mirkwood would be my answer. On the other hand, I have Rohan. I really love the Rohan vibe, that particularly in the film, etc. So I collected Rohan for quite a lot in the strategy game. I did have a Hobbit army, which was fun. Just the full sheer fun of lots of little guys throwing stones at the enemy. So yeah, I think ultimately the love is elves from the woods.
Okay, one last question before we go back to the pre-organised questions. So this one has feel free to skip this one if you want to amend them on the end. If you could take a hammer to a particular range and destroy all evidence of it, what would it be? I don't know if there's anything you particularly don't like.
Definitely not the question that I'm comfortable with answering, because I have to keep working relationships with people, you understand, and companies, etc. So I think we'll skip that one.
Cool. We'll choose the diplomatic path here.
They're all equally good. They're all equally great. Yes. It will be a pleasure to keep working with all of these companies and all of their beautiful miniatures.
So, Marcus, they've heard a lot of my voice with the chat for a bit. If you want to read question 5,
Yeah,
I think we're on 5.
Yeah, we are on 5. So here's one that's a little bit topical, a little bit recent. The FAQs, they always generate a ton of discussion around the bolt action community at large, everywhere on the internet, in person. Does it ever surprise you, some of the questions and some of the things that come out of them, the responses that it generates?
Tiger fear. I mean, yes, tiger fear indeed. That was a good example. Yes, a lot of conversation. Yes, it's a lot of feedback, which obviously, when polite, is very useful and definitely willing to listen to and engage with. And indeed, when I used to go to tournaments, I felt that on my skin. It's like when the big tank comes around and you go, all of my units, really? So yes, it is scary as a designer to see sometimes the reaction of the crowd, and because you're afraid of getting things wrong, you're afraid of causing a ruckus, you're afraid to disappoint people and create a case. But I think we've been fairly good. I think that the bolt action system is very solid, and the FAQs have tried to listen to the community and bring it in and answer, because thanks to you guys and the fact that you are the filter that brings in to me the more common, the more frequently asked questions, and so I see that as a service that we do, listening, engaging, and trying to listen without obviously you cannot listen to everybody because every single opinion, because often there are 10 different opinions on the same thing, contradicting opinions. It's going to go, I cannot please, you can never please everybody.
Yeah, you can't buff the tigers and nerf the tigers at the same time. It just doesn't work.
It is difficult. It's a balance, and obviously the designer has to make those calls and decide, and fully knowing that you will piss off some people and you will please some other people, and you'll have to live with that. You have to live with that in forums, maybe for years to come. And it's like, oh, you did that thing. You created the rattling gun. I hate you. It's like, like 20 years later, you're going to go, yeah, okay.
I don't think it's appropriate to bring up my old forum post back when my dad played Skaven, okay?
Yeah, that's definitely just so much feedback. Just kind of a very quick follow-on to that one. Has there ever been one that's just completely blown you away? You thought, oh, this is super simple, nobody will mind this is absolutely fine. And then everyone's exploded. Or you thought, this is going to really annoy everyone. And everyone's just been like, yeah, sweet, lovely.
I can think of a recent one that did surprise me in the Labyrinth board game, where basically to win, once you win and defeated the Goblin King, you have to recite the poem that she says at the end of the movie. You have no power over me, long poem, and we put a card in the game that actually has the poem on, saying, "Oh yeah, when you finish the game, you have to recite the poem so to defeat the Goblin King." So, which was a joke. You kind of think, yeah, you have to recite the poem, otherwise you cannot win, etc. By the way, there's a card in there which has the poem. Of course, you can read it, the first few times because you learn it, expecting that was a joke. It's a joke, right? Yeah, everybody will take it as a joke. As the joke it is, it's obviously a joke. I read till this day, some reviews of people going, "Unbelievable! You have to memorize a poem to win this game. It's incredible. How can demand people to memorize?" I'm gonna go, okay, maybe I should have written, "This is a joke. Ha ha." It's not. You don't have to memorize the poem. It's okay. You won the game. That was like a fun thing at the end. So that was one. That was a bit like that. And sorry, the other way around was something that you thought was very difficult, but actually was accepted well, kind of thing. Is that?
Yeah.
More difficult to think of something like that because normally you don't plan, you don't envision something that is going to be difficult, and then you're surprised by it being simple, because that would mean you think it's difficult, kind of thing. So it's not. No, I don't think I can answer that one.
No, that's reasonable.
But I mean, the Tiger Fear, again, bringing it up as an example, is that yes, there was debate, a lot of debate, and yes, indeed, it was funny when we got errata. It was like, oh, actually, the errata didn't actually, maybe it made it even worse. Maybe we should do an errata to the errata, and the kind of thing. So that was interesting. And when you get in the loophole, you are afraid indeed that you're like, ooh, what are we doing here? Is this too much, kind of thing? But eventually seemed to, maybe I'm completely wrong here, but it seems to have got to a place where maybe most people would get around right now. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see if that continues when the tournament scene reopens. I guess we'll find out.
Well, nobody's sending us pictures of Panzer IVs in the bin anymore, which is normally a sign of good things.
Helps, doesn't it? Yes. Yeah, well, actually, that was interesting because it was the intent of the rule on one side. The rule was specifically written based on the actual historical fact that Allied crews would think, "Oh my God, a Tiger!" when they saw a Panzer IV with a long-barreled gun. Yeah, so you're trying to represent that, but obviously that means that those tanks are the ones that benefit, and while the Tiger, because it's a Tiger, doesn't have that. Oh, it's a cheap tank that looks more expensive than it is, more powerful than it is. So the rule is aimed for the smaller tanks, but then people want you to make it worse for them and better for the other ones. But actually, history is saying no, it's for them. It's for the smaller ones, kind of thing, specifically. Because Tiger looks like a Tiger, It's like, yeah. The point is, Panzer IV also looks like a Tiger, kind of thing. So yeah, difficult, tricky one, that one.
So, a quick question here from Epic Blade. Do you have a favourite Warhammer Fantasy faction?
Britannia.
Wood
Elves, Skaven. Yeah, those were the armies I collected because I obviously prefer them. I love the chivalry. The Knights of Chivalry. The Code of Chivalry is something that I personally love. As I said before, I love elves that live in the wood and dress in green. And the Skaven, I just found it funny, entertaining. It's just very cute. So yeah, those are my favorite factions. I don't know which one is the faction.
I can appreciate that. It's hard to pick a favourite.
Very.
So a bolt action question here. Do you stat every unit model to be competitive, or are there some that intentionally provide less value for points?
Yes, it's intentional. Yes. Well, I mean, point values obviously are another area which is complex, and one wishes there was the perfect formula that made everything exactly the same value, exactly the same balance, etc. Again, with so many variables, is really difficult. And when it's just stats and armor 7 versus armor 8 versus armor 9 is one thing, but when you start to add special rules and you kind of go, all right, okay, slow reload. How many points is that? So when you start to bring in more things than just numbers, then your formulas have to be very, very good. And therefore, I don't think you can get it always 100% right. There will always be, the thing like, well, this rule, maybe we didn't account it for it so much, and maybe we thought it was coming out a bit less, and it's coming out a lot more. And so, there will be always things that are a bit better value for money than others. I suppose the good thing is that often in so many variables, there's always a counter for things, and it's like the paper scissors stone thing, where actually, this thing is a bit good, but this other thing actually nukes it. So if you rely too much on this thing, then people start to take the other thing, and then suddenly your thing becomes less viable until you find the next new thing that needs to be used. So I would say we strive for balance, we strive for playtest and balance everything, and obviously, ideally, everything is 100%. Like I said before, there will be a degree of imprecision, a degree of development, and that's what you do next iterations, next versions of the game, etc. So we strive for that, but.
Okay, so I just want to jump ahead to question 8, Marcus, because I've seen this pop up in the chat already, and some people have been asking things similar to it. So I want to jump ahead to that one. So a lot of people are interested in rules development, either professionally or for their own games for home ruling and things like that. Can you give some tips for people looking to make their own rules or games? I'm sure you've been asked this a million times, but if you've got like a hot tip, I think I've heard you answer this very question in an interview before, but here we are.
Yes, it's a common question, of course. Well, I think I already touched upon this in this very interview, the fact that my mantra is always to try to keep things simple. Is the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid, kind of thing. That basically we tend to add complexity always as an answer to problems. I would say to people, well, try, as instead of adding rules to explain situations, etc., try to remove rules and not worry about it. The good example, I think, was that, fleeing units. How do we deal with fleeing units? What fleeing units? There are no fleeing units, kind of thing. That attitude of cutting things is something that Jervis Johnson certainly taught me, and one of his design principles was indeed that the game is finished when not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to remove, because you've been chopping, killing, murdering all your darlings, and try to you're writing a rule for a specific situation, write it, and then go, do I really need this bit? Yeah, let's chop it off. Does it still work? Maybe it doesn't cover 200% of the situations, because, what if this other bit, I could write another rule, or perhaps you could not worry about that particular thing. That's never going to happen. Of course, it will happen, of course, next time you play, but so it's, I think, removing and simplifying and making things shorter is often more useful than adding and making it very difficult to interact with. So, try to keep it short, basically, would be mine.
So this next question off the back of that might be basically no, but are there any mechanics or rules that you've seen in other game systems or in other people's home rulings that you'd like to see added to Bolt Action in the future?
Good question.
That was from Stumpy the goalie, for everyone in chat.
Added to Bolt Action. Nothing springs to mind. I suppose is a good sign.
That's confidence.
No, not really. No, I mean, because if there was a way of simplifying things, perhaps maybe like I remember once we did an edition of 40k. I don't remember again the numbers. It's a big blur of 15 years of editions. But there was a step between one edition and the other where, for example, we took away some modifiers. And in fact, all modifiers, the roll to hit was based on a straight number. There were no modifiers. And that speeds up the game so much. So, that kind of stuff. I maybe look at Bolt Action and go, what can I do to make this even faster without losing the granularity, without losing the complexity and stuff? For example, cover is a good thing. Yeah. Cover at the moment is a modifier to hit. So it makes, adds, subtracts, add, subtract. And you go, what if there was no modifier there, but then maybe you had a roll for like a save based on cover? That would change the game slightly, maybe not statistically, but in the way it would flow, stuff like that. Is the can I make the game flow even faster, simpler, more accessible to young people? You know, so that you don't have to do all these complex maths. And so what do you need to roll to hit? +1, -2, -1, -1, starting off 3. That. Can I make that simpler? Yeah, I think that's a good question to ask. For example,
I think
there's a way.
I think it does happen the other way. I've seen a lot of people take things from bolt action and apply it to other things. For me, when I first picked up first played bolt action, I was absolutely in love with the dice bag system. I've seen that applied to things like 40k going the other way, and I love how it's more interactive, less you go, I go. So I can also see it happening the other way, which is interesting.
I've seen that a few times, and obviously as a designer, it's you're proud of seeing that. You go, nice.
Cool. So a bit of a personal question here, perhaps. Who was the most challenging opponent you've ever had to play in a wargame?
Well, it's you, of course. Always difficult.
I'm going to get a reputation after last week and now this.
Challenging. Well, there's different ways of being challenging. I think possibly the most challenging. I don't remember the name of the fella, but there was this guy that we kept playing. I don't remember. Was it Warhammer? I think it was Warhammer. We were playing this game, and the guy was going on about the rules, you know. And as a designer, you don't want to say I'm the designer, you know. So I always went, no, let's read the rules. Let's read the rules. And so if I can find an answer, I'll show you why I say that, you know, this works like this, because look, it's here, it says here, you know, and I stick to this approach, kind of going this, you know. I go, no, that's not what this meant. No, that's not what it was like. I assure you that's what it's meant, but actually, if you read it, you know, no, let's call the umpire, let's call the referee, or something. The umpire comes over and goes, tell this guy that, and the poor umpire kind of going, you know, you wrote this the book and the rule book and the book you're using, and it's like I gotta go. But it means that you cannot say, listen, look, read the name on the bloody book. I cannot, you know, for God's sake. No, call another umpire. Call the chief umpire. So yes, it was a bit of a difficult situation there. It was quite funny. But, you know, I had similarly funny situations where, I mean, the other one, the very funny one was the guy that didn't recognize me. That was hilarious. Sorry if this is a bit of a funny. The guy, tournament again, I'm playing. Guy plays, and I realize that he doesn't recognize me, which is great. I love when people don't, because then we can be ourselves. I don't have to, you know, I don't have the shadow. Oh my God, I'm playing the author, or kind of thing. That's pressure. Yeah, that actually is far more relaxing playing with somebody who doesn't know who you are. So, and far more enjoyable, frankly. So, I'm enjoying this game, playing this guy, and nice relationships. And at some point, we have a rules issue, and I go, I think it works like this. And the guy goes, no, I think it works like this. You don't think? And he said, listen, I hear that today had the tournament. Cavatore is here. You know, maybe we should ask the referees to call him and you know, and ask what because he will know, etc. And you see that the guy's playing next to us. Kind of start to hear a very funny atmosphere where the guy goes. Everybody's starting to look at him a bit funny. And he goes, "Wow, what? You're playing him." I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you. I was like, no, don't be sorry. I'm sorry. That was actually good fun. But at that moment, it was hilarious. Let's call Cavatore. I'm like, no, that's not call Cavatore. He doesn't understand anything. It was very funny. Very, very funny. Anyway,
I'll be honest, there was a moment when we last played where something came up and I was like, actually, I'm like, no, I'll drop that. Probably not.
Well, you know, it happens all the time. It is a very interesting experience, actually, to play a game that you have written. And it definitely means that I cannot be as competitive as I used to be, because obviously part of it was discussing the rules, and sometimes when the situation is gray, you know, forcing a certain interpretation that goes your way is part of the skill of being a strong player in a war game. And I cannot do that at all anymore, of course, because I have to be super polite, and I don't want to engage in these conversations. So I'm 200% nicer and go, no, you're right. Yeah, no, your way. No, I don't want to engage. Kind of thing. So yeah, it made me less aggressive, much more nice to play with, I guess.
So I want to ask a really weird question from intelligent Mr. Toad here, good friend of ours. If you could go back in time and play a series of farcical and practical jokes on one historical character and pinch a souvenir, who would it be? And what would you like to grab?
Whoa! What a question! Like really going back in history and...
Yeah, you got the time machine, but only for mischief. We have some interesting regulars.
Wow, that is a question and a half, isn't it? Oh, God. I think playing. I think I would go to every possible fascist dictator in the world and just make their life a misery. That would be so funny. All this pride and big cheese and this Mussolini kind of going and this, rubber ducks and things like this. Like try to make them completely ridiculous in front of everybody. That would be fun. Yeah, it's like
follow the route of Charlie Chaplin there.
yeah, absolutely.
Marcus, do you want to read one of the pre-written ones while I check through the chat for a little bit?
Yeah, no worries. I think we've kind of touched on bits and bobs about what the future of bolt action is. So I think the first part of question 6 doesn't really apply. But 7A and B, quite a good one. Nice simple ones. So firstly, what's your favourite unit in bolt action to use on the tabletop, or the unit you like the most? And what's the unit that when you see it on the table or you see it in someone's list, you just dread it the most? You go, oh God, they've got one of those.
Yeah, that's easy actually. I definitely have a favorite in my American army, and whenever I can field it, I will. It's my little Stuart with the recce rule. The Stuart with the recce rule is brilliant. It's such an unassuming little tank, and people tend to go, I don't worry about that. And they tend not to worry about that until it starts to zip on their side and shooting them in the side with this is a light anti-tank gun, but in the side, most things start to worry about it. And you're so flexible, you move around, you have 2 machine guns in case you need them, and it's very flexible and actually quite tough on Armor 8. It's not easy, even when you decide to take it as opposed to just recce out of the way. Armor 8 is not that bad. So unless you're being shot by some mega gun, but so I always found it both entertaining to play and good fun and actually tactically quite useful. So I would say that my Stuart is my little favorite unit in my American army. What do I dread? For me, is horde armies. When I see those huge, basically conscripts with Japanese conscripts with bamboo sticks, is the hordes of those. Whenever people go for the mass, I just go, I don't have the firepower. I just don't have enough shots. I just go, oh. So is that... when people use the tactic of the mass waves of charging, whether it's Soviet or Japanese, is that kind of huge amount of troops, I find it very difficult to deal with that kind of army. I much prefer facing elite armies, the kind of Faschinjäger kind of very small units, etc. Because then it becomes very much the paper, scissors, stones, where I use this to kill that, but then actually just the human hordes, you just go, nope, not enough shots. We're gonna get here. I had the experience of playing that in Japan, Tokyo, in a store. I was facing a Japanese chap, which brought this huge horde, etc. And of course, we shoot them. My Americans as they come forward, and then of course the guy probably never had seen that before. It was actually quite funny. Where basically when they get close enough, instead of having the last shot on them being overwhelmed, we just went, fix bayonets. so the American infantry comes out of the trenches and starts charging against the Japanese, which obviously is probably, you guys are very good players. That's probably the best thing you can do, because if you wait, you kind of go. And basically that was so funny, because again, you could see him and his mates looking around, kind of going, the Americans? charging us? What? Like, I go, yeah, not very historical, I realize, but yeah, it works. Let me show you.
No, saying you don't like fighting horde armies makes me feel bad. Last time we played, I took my Soviets, and I don't feel comfortable if I don't have 60 models on the board.
Yes.
When we played, I brought my Tiger too, so yeah, pretty much the other end of the spectrum.
So another one from Stumpy here. Following up on simplifying or streamlining, the game flows very fast for his group and is easy. Probably the most time-consuming aspect is moving large squads of infantry, then rolling 2 or 3 different sets of dice because of different weapons and different ranges. And on top of that, some units are in... Okay, not a question, a comment. And on top of that, squads with some units are in effective range and some at long range. Yeah. Some people, possibly something else, but I kind of like that. I like having LMGs in a squad.
Well, it goes together with what we were talking about. I mean, if I can do something to reduce a bit that modifiers, ranges, and stuff, so that, that there's a fewer things to consider when you're actually resolving a shot, a roll to hit. Maybe that would speed up things without making it, simpler, too simplistic, I guess. Yeah, something to look at.
Okay, so let's get back to one of the written questions. So we've done 8. Let's move on to that one. So question 9 there. When you originally wrote Bolt Action, did you see it coming in more as a casual gaming experience or a competitive? Was there one specifically in mind, or did you try and cut it down the middle?
Well, the brief for the game that we agreed with John and Rick and Paul was definitely seems like the Beatles. John, Paul, Rick, right? Well, the brief was definitely to make sure that the game was both enjoyable at both ends, effectively, so that people could enjoy it as a casual game, friendly game, but could also stand the test of being played competitively. And therefore, if I remember correctly, Rick said, that's why we're asking you to write it, because if I write it, it would be too friendly. We need a bit of nastiness here, so that we're asking you to put some nastiness in this. It was like, okay, I can put nastiness in it. Basically, I had this reputation for being a bit of a competitive player. But, so yeah, it is supposedly enjoyable by both type of players, and as long as you agree with your opponent how you want to play, or for the organizers of the event, is it a campaign, fun event, is it a hard-nosed tournament, as long as that's clear for everybody, the game should accommodate for both. Which one does it go better for? I guess it's a matter of taste, so I don't really know how to answer that. I guess we have to turn the question around. How do you guys think? And what's your experience? Is there more people playing for fun, playing competitively?
I think there's more people playing for fun, but I think that's a reflection on the community as a whole, if that makes sense. I think Warlord Games has a pretty casual player base, because a lot of our games, you think like the mass battle systems, Hail Caesar, Black Powder, and things like that, they tend towards, let's make it fun, let's keep it super streamlined and get it done in an evening kind of games with huge forces. So I think we've already got a player base where a lot of people are playing non-competitively. So I think we end up with more casual players. And then on top of that, you've got people who play like once in a blue moon because they're more interested in the hobby aspect or the collecting aspect. But at the same time, me and Marcus go to tournaments quite often. So, and we've never been, never had a bad tournament. Maybe 1 or 2 games where we've got absolutely crushed each, but and possibly once or twice crushing. But generally, it's a fun game. It's balanced, and well, there's a few units you don't see. There's no armies you don't see, if that makes sense. So maybe machine guns don't show up a whole lot overall. But it's not like, oh, you never see a Japanese army or you never see Germans take it. Every army's represented, so clearly it's balanced enough that everyone has their space in a competitive scene. So I think that's a kind of sign that everyone's not just chasing the meta of, if you're playing competitive, you play US or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, thank you for that. It's good feedback. Indeed, I have seen people playing. I mean, I go to tournaments, played tournaments quite often, but on the other end, I do enjoy mega game at the Perry's on their or on Rick's table or on John Stallard's tables. Those completely for fun, entertaining. Can enjoy both. So yeah, I guess it works with both. Then some people will prefer one or the other, of course, but it kind of can take both. Which cool. Objective achieved.
Let's have a look at the chat quickly, because there's quite a lot of conversation going on in there, and one that's actually just popped up that I like quite a lot is from WAQCBC. So obviously we talked at the start of the episode about you are constantly thinking and discussing about updates for a new edition of Bolt Action for version 3 whenever that happens. How much of that do you kind of end up collating? How many pages, if you like, are there that are going to get worked out and condensed down to Bolt Action version 3 eventually right now? Are we talking like reams and reams?
No, actually, obviously the errata and FAQs are there, and we will obviously make sure that those get input in the new edition. But the elements that we want to play with in terms of the game, and we're considering, discussing, debating, are not huge and are not many, because maybe, I guess, it's the curse of having a game that is fairly solid, and you definitely don't want to ruin it. You don't want to go too radical and change it completely. It's like, let's remove the activation dice. No, nobody thinks that. So the core of it works really well, and we were happy with, and people seem to be happy with it. I enjoy it when I play it, which again for me is an important standard. I want to design a game that I actually enjoy. So I definitely don't feel the need to tinker with the core of it. As I said, maybe simplifying a bit the calculations, remove some math. Definitely machine guns. You brought that up. Machine guns being definitely we think there's the proportion between how effective they are inside vehicles and as opposed to the ones that are actually in the field is a bit too good on the vehicle side at the moment. Yeah, so it's kind of like, well, actually, in a vehicle, a machine gun should not be as effective as a machine gun on the ground, where actually you're set up on a tripod and you can wheel around. You have the good visibility, as opposed to you're firing through a slit this big, and while you're doing another task, and
you got the radio going.
Doing, yes, and actually your slit is doing this, because your thing is going over terrain. So it's like, what are you gonna hit? Nothing. You're hardly seeing anything in what you're shooting at. So it's mostly you're making noise with that thing to try to scare
off the guy with the Panzer.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's more of a psychological thing than actually aiming at something, etc. Unless, I suppose, if the tank is stationary and then you're taking aim, maybe with a coaxial, trying to help the gunner, whatever. But they definitely shouldn't be as effective, and at the moment they're very similar in terms of effect, if not the same. So clearly that's the thing that we need to. So there are some elements we are looking at, but it's not. Even if if and when we're going to do an expedition, don't expect it to be a completely different game, because that, I think, nobody wants that. And so we'll try to tweak it slightly, improve it, challenge it, maybe look a bit more at the army list, army balance, army selection, something like that. So there's other areas we can look at scenarios and how to make scenarios, and maybe make a scenario build, or work on the things that are around the core system. But definitely the core system, we don't really want to do anything to it, really, to the main core engine.
Changing the game without changing everything.
So, like a question sort of going off of that. You were mentioning with like FAQs and erratas that a lot of it is based on community feedback. When you do get big changes, how much of it is community and how much of it is internal play testing, personal opinions? Looking at something between V1 and 2, for example, the move from hit dice to templates. Was that a feedback thing? Was that play testing? Or just gut feeling that you think it would play more enjoyably with the templates?
Well, that was John Stallard told me so.
Crazy how it
works. Basically, that was an internal drive, particularly due to the fact that the absence of HE explosion, anything that basically affected areas of the table, meant that people tended to. Some people would concentrate their units, concentrate them very, very packed and really tightly, and therefore, to maximize firepower, because basically you have if these guys are all together, that all the shooting of this unit goes through a very small, narrow frontage. Therefore, I can maybe put more units on a narrow frontage and almost like in a column and fire, which I think John did look at that and he hated it, understandably, because obviously he looks at it from a realistic point of view, from an aesthetic point of view, and World War II.
You don't want them in
Napoleonic
formations.
World War II shouldn't look like Napoleonics. So we looked at solutions about how to do that. One solution was indeed to introduce templates. And templates, in order so that actually was important, physically people felt that spacing their models out would make them less vulnerable, which is realistic. Is that if you advance, you don't bunch up, spread out, guys. You've seen the movies. I mean, I've never been in real combat, but I've seen the movies, and there's always the spread out thing. So that was driven by history, driven by aesthetics. Because John definitely is not a competitive player. He's very much a kind of a friendly player. He likes his history and he likes his soldiers and his tables, but it's definitely not in for the rules and for the kill. But so basically, that was one option to introduce explosive. There would be other options. I mean, we could maybe explore other options as well, or instead, the reason for that rule is that you can shoot through members of your own squad. And ignore them, while you wouldn't do it with another unit in front of you, but you can do it with the guys. Maybe it's as simple as say you can't ignore the guys in your own squad. Yes, if you have guys in your own squad in front, you can't shoot. Therefore, again, that would mean that people will have to spread out more in order to use the fiber. So there's different solutions to that point, and whether we're gonna explore, but that particular one in the example was definitely a very strong directive from a position of authority and the owner of the company that said, I don't like that, make it go away. It's like, yes, sir.
No, it's fair.
I'll argue with that one.
We got any others? Okay, that's an interesting one. I don't know if you've had any chance to play around with any of this. SW9999. Any tips for transferring rules to solo gameplay? What with the world the way it is it something you've ever given any consideration to, or?
So the SW something was the name of the person writing that.
Yes.
Right. I thought it was the game system. I was like, I never heard of that one. No, I never played that. Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah. So have I ever thought about
solo play? A lot of people are looking into that at the moment.
Solo play, yeah, there is that in these days, isn't it? Not for bolt action, no. I certainly have done that for other war games. I mean, the Terminator war game, for example, had rules for the endoskeletons, for the machines, to act on a script. They had like a flowchart, is target visible? No. Advance towards closest, not visible target. And kind of, so there was a script that they will follow, a logic thing, like a programming, which obviously fits better maybe with that kind of game, of course, with a sci-fi game like that. I'm sure that something similar could be done with World War II, as in a very simple, like that kind of thing. It's like, can units see an enemy unit? No. Advance towards closest enemy, because you heard some noise in that direction, so it works, even if you're not a machine. So it's not something we have done, but it's something that we could be looking into. Of course, the other thing at the moment we're looking into, obviously, is if there's a possibility of remote playing. If there's a chance of playing on tabletop simulator or through cameras, or if there's a way of sharing an experience without actually being there in person. It's become sadly very, very relevant now. Of course, the counter to all of that is the medium of wargaming is very physical. It's very tactile. Is the smells, is the feel, is that atmosphere that is very much related with your senses, and therefore the old single play thing. There's another medium which does that really well, which is really difficult to compete with, which is computer games. Play Call of Duty kind of thing, or play Total War, or something. It depends on strategy level, first-person shooter, etc. So it's difficult to compete with that in terms of solo play. So
Yeah.
it's a big competition out there for that.
Coming off the side of the sorry, Marcus, go on.
I was just going to say to Alessio, thank you for mentioning Total War so that we didn't have to, because we normally mention it at least once an episode, and you kept the streak alive for another week.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite games.
Oh, yeah.
Just spurring off the solo play and just the way the world is, someone had asked earlier in the chat, have you been using anything like Tabletop Simulator for anything during this time?
Oh, professionally, we use Tabletop Simulator, if not every day, every other day, because obviously playtesting these days is really, I cannot meet my employees really to play test, and I cannot meet with my colleagues and other people from, if we play test bolt action stuff, then at this moment, Tabletop Simulator is a good solution, and if you play test board games like we do, Tabletop Simulator is a thing. If you play test role play games, then there's Roll20 and other things. So definitely we have been using, particularly TTS as a tool in our business. Frankly, is an important tool. I mean, at the moment we are designing games for a Mexican company, and again, you're playtesting with your customers which are on the other side of the world.
Yeah,
that's very useful.
Oh, that's cool. Nice to see behind the see inside the process a little bit there.
Yeah. Haggard asking the question that we all knew was coming. So, Alessio, we've mentioned it. What is your favourite Total War game? Very quickly.
Shogun 2, perhaps. Yeah, I think the Japanese setting is fantastic for all the colors, the symbols, and it's still history, but has a little bit of fantasiness to it. The ninjas. I have a weakness for Japan, definitely. I mean, I do kendo. I married a Japanese lady, so yeah. No, I am fascinated by Japan, and the Shogun. Also, in terms of gameplay, I find the modern versions of Total War getting a little bit messy when it comes to the fighting. I tend to do a lot more of the campaign and very rarely actually getting into the tactical, because particularly large battles, you just get this huge mess of units interpenetrating and mixing in, and then you kind of go, well, I prefer in the Shogun one, and perhaps actually Napoleon. Maybe is a big between the Napoleonic and the Shogun, is because that line formation, that the units keep their integrity a bit more. They don't kind of merge into masses as there, so you can see a bit more I'll put a line here, I'll put a square there, I'll put my archers over here, and they will stay in this formation and just get into a huge mob. So yeah, I think gameplay on the tactical level, I prefer the older versions, but obviously the graphics, I mean, I'm playing recently, right now, actually playing Warhammer 2. And yeah, it looks fantastic. Obviously, it's amazing. But gameplay, I think I prefer, Shogun, the Japanese and the Napoleonic ones.
Nice. Two of my favourites as well.
Acceptable answers.
So we got one of our regulars here in the chat, Mike, new to Bolt Action, saying his first army is the US Airborne. How do you rate the US Airborne as an army?
In general, I mean, I prefer to play just the U.S. Army, just because I tend to field armies which are on the regular level of experience. Part of it, I guess, is again, being a designer, you want to play vanilla armies and be kind of flexible and friendly and nice and balanced, and I want to go for one extreme. As I said before, I prefer playing against small armies because, again, is more contained. You can play this very tactical game, while actually against the huge horde armies is a bit. So I prefer elite armies to conscript armies for sure. Particularly the U.S. Airborne. I mean, obviously they suffered for a while about being the only paratroopers that weren't stubborn, which obviously we're trying to address that with supplements and stuff, and probably in the long term we'll take
they
care
got the
of that.
move and fire. That's good enough for me.
Yes, but in terms of paratroopers, perhaps if you make the comparison with every other paratrooper in the game, they seem to all be stubborn, and you aren't, which obviously I can see that being a bit frustrating. But that was just simply because being the that was one of the first armies that we made, and the author at the time didn't put it, and everybody else seemed to want to put that, and it will take care of it, of course, and we are taking care of it in the supplements, of course.
Okay. So we're on the last 10 minutes. What we normally do for the last 10 minutes is we do what's called the amnesty, where we open up the questions for anything that's possibly a little bit off topic and a little bit weird. Of course, if anyone asks something too weird, we obviously will still leave it. But I see, where was it? We got one that's already pretty weird here. What item from the companies that you've worked for would you be least surprised about seeing on the Antiques Roadshow?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Sorry.
Well.
What item? So what do I think that would be classed as a used thing, old thing, relic?
Yeah, I think possibly what will keep the most value as a collector's piece in the future.
As a collector piece?
Yeah, something that people will want.
Well, I suppose some of my those things that Games Workshop gave to the employees after 10 years, etc. You get these like just Goodwin sculpted Space Marine things, etc. I'm sure those will certainly have some value. As in things you couldn't buy, then those would be big value. But again, things that you don't want to sell, really. I mean, I do have a John Blanche. The sketch over there, but yeah. So difficult question. Next, please.
That's fair. So this one came up in the chat a little bit earlier, but I'll bring it back because I think I missed it. What was a rule that you've had to cut from bolt action that you missed the most, or wish it was something similar would come back? So anything you've had to just... You were saying earlier that you had to strip down, streamline. Is there anything you missed, kind of wish it would come back?
Quite the opposite, actually.
Okay.
I would go the other way around. I would say that there are things in bolt action that made it into the final thing that I would have liked to cut out and were not cut out in the end. So, or added back in, stuff like that. So there's like smoke, smoke ammunition, something that, I didn't particularly like. I would probably, if I had my way, I would have cut it out. There are a few things that I would cut out, like smoke, for example. I probably have a penchant that I would cut out Recce as well, but that's probably a bit too much.
That's fair.
A step too far, a bridge too far to say.
You'd be nerfing your own favourite unit.
Interesting one actually from sorry, Max, go on.
No, go
on. Interesting one from Spindleshanks 88, which kind of ties into things about rules and keeping it simple. Did you find it difficult when you're writing a really legendary unit, like the SAS, for example? Was it hard to keep them reasonably balanced and actually usable in the game instead of just completely overpowered, but still make them realistic and a bit faithful?
Well, it's funny because a lot of different units in many different armies. If you listen to the people that maybe are from that country, or of course, they would tell you, well, these guys are the toughest of the toughest, the most. And you speak to a British guy, and that's the SAS. You speak to a Finnish guy, the Saudella Pirrekka. These guys, superhuman. So they take combat drugs. You understand? They will do this and that. So you have all of that different perception, and because it's history, it's very difficult to kind of it's like, are these guys so much harder than these other guys, or kind of like they're elite force, very well trained, very well equipped, very motivated, but these Japanese super trained guys, are they actually better than these American or these Germans? So there's a lot of... It's very funny with history, because with fantasy and science fiction, of course, you can go, oh, these guys are unkillable. They have a force field and this and that, genetically altered, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, in history, you can go, well, still a man, if you hit in the chest with a 30 millimeter thing, most men react the same way, kind of thing. So is a bit more difficult to go extreme. That's what I'm trying to say. So you have to, which I suppose is both an advantage, because you cannot go super broken, but this guy is unkillable, and that doesn't happen. Everybody's pretty killable, even if you're elite and stuff. But the other thing, of course, is you do give them a lot of special rules, and we always try to make sure that the points values means they're really like the SAS. They're really, really hard. They have lots of rules. They're very well equipped, and so they have a lot of going for them. But on the other hand, you try to make them really expensive. So obviously, you try to balance that way and try to make sure that they are, balanced. But again, World War II history is better from that point of view. You don't really. It's more difficult to go uber, unkillable, doom, etc.
Yeah.
I had few experiences in fantasy settings or science fiction settings where you kind of go, "Oh, we made this thing a bit too hard, perhaps."
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of any other questions we got now.
Well, I mean, there was just to expand a little bit on this one. There was the army lists and army special rule for history in bolt action, for example, and is that you don't want to offend people, but also you want to play to the stereotypes a bit, because clearly we've watched the movies, and every nation has some stereotypes, but of course you cannot go really hard on some things because you gotta go, well, I have to keep these things politically correct. So keeping that balance of politically correct and not hurting sensitivities and actually making funny army lists. I thought funny, entertaining, colorful things. It's not everybody is the same, because ultimately, yes, they're all men, but you want each army to play slightly differently. So it's and we had fun with that, of course. And there's a sort of like there's a version of these armies which are not for publication, not for public knowledge, where actually we removed the politically correct thing, etc., which was quite funny. I suppose I can say the Italian one, being that where I had written a rule for the Italians which was invincible. And invincible meant, well, it meant that basically if you play a game against an Italian opponent, an Italian army, and if the Italian army won, they won, you lost. If you won, but they scored a draw, because they were on your side from the start, really. So it actually counts as a draw. So you literally invincible. They couldn't lose the game. No way. And so on. I could offend every single nationality. Of course, I just limited myself to offending Italians, but I could do the same for everybody. There's enough for everybody.
So you've mentioned Hollywood and inspirations there. What would you say the essential movie list for a bolt action player is? Because I can think of a few, but you had to say three that every bolt action player should see.
Band of Brothers.
Yeah.
Band of Brothers for me is bolt action. Yeah, it is that. I think the Pacific is a bit too grim. It's a bit too grim. I enjoy the big classics. I enjoy, I would say, A Bridge Too Far, and I enjoy The Longest Day. Those are my, big classics. Those three, I think. Yeah. So let's say Band of Brothers, Longest Day, and Bridge Too Far. There are just some amazing scenes in all of those. I mean, for classic. The German officer go, "I come here to negotiate surrender with with the guys in Arnhem." He goes, "Oh, I'm awfully sorry, old chap. We cannot take you. We don't have the facilities to take you all prisoners." And the guy going.
I mean, no surprises there, but all really good movies. Having seen all of them, yeah, no surprises there. So I'm going to say last questions for everyone in the chat. No more entries here. We'll just queer out the last couple ones. Okay, so nothing too big. Is there any other World War II systems that you look into at all, or is it you try and keep it stuck into just bolt action?
In terms of playing, definitely not. I mean, I used to play Flames of War before bolt action, obviously, because there was no bolt action. I only played. I think there's the only actual World War II system that I think I might have played something earlier, but I don't remember what it was. Firepower, maybe? Yes, years and years ago. So no, not really. No,
that's fair.
Not really.
There we go, and two left after this one. If the British Army book ever gets a second edition update, will it incorporate the new Canadian Army rules? So would it potentially have the other ones as well from the other books.
Yes. No. I don't. Genuine answer, I don't know. It's not something that we thought about, to be honest.
Too far in the future.
We'll think
possibly.
about it when we get to that. Yeah.
So I think going to be the same answer here, but I'll ask the question either way. Speaking of Italians, any chance of new special rules for them?
Again, when and if we'll be doing an Italian book, I'm sure that that was an army that was very difficult to develop actually, because the reputation. Again, you try to do the reputation, you try to do stereotype without doing too much of a stereotype, and obviously the reputation of the Italian army in World War II is not very good. So, but obviously you cannot make an army has negative special rules. I mean, it's okay to throw in the one or two special rules, negative ones to balance positive ones, etc. But you cannot just go, yeah, the equipment, no, very good. World War I, really. Motivation and training, yeah, no, not exceptional, except for this couple of units that are really, really hard, like the Folger and stuff. But most people really didn't want to be in that war. So, so you kind of, yeah, not very well motivated. Yeah. Well, what's good? Oh, cooking, fantastic! Yeah, no, they're fantastic chefs. However, to make that into bolt action, you kind of go. So you have to try to find a balance, and then and it's difficult sometimes. Some armies didn't perform as well as others. At least in the stereotypical vision that we have, they didn't. In reality, who knows? I mean, I wasn't there, so. but. Would I want to do something different with Italians when we get around to redo them? Whenever we get to redo them? Yeah, I think the one problem at the moment is they're very defensive, which again is historical. Definitely not a very static army, which was built to fight World War One. It wasn't built to fight World War Two. The idea is like, we'll dig a trench and defend this, kind of thing. It's like, but they're not. They have tanks and airplanes, and no, it doesn't work like that anymore. It's like. Oh. Bother. So again, an army is good defensively, but not really very good offensively. So maybe that's the way to make a craft rule. But on the other end, that difference makes it very dependent on the scenario you're playing, which again, is something a bit clunky there. So possibly some way to look at it and represent it in a different way. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll call it there. We've gone for an hour and a half, which is our usual time. So, I've seen a couple of people say thank you in chat for answering the questions and taking the time here. And thank you from me and Marcus as well. It's been a pleasure having you on. And hopefully at some point we might be able to get you on for a live game or another interview sometime in the future.
One day, yes. No, thank you for having me and for giving me a chance of talking about games and Lord of the Rings. And so, yeah, it was good fun.
Yeah. Right. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe and have a great week.
See you next week, folks.